Hi there, I'm Sarah Andrews, and this is David Collister, and we are Inclusionaries. We focus on the core common elements of human existence to establish a central point of connection and understanding for all of us. And today we are still within our series on the mechanics of spirit, and we wanted to go through an actual story of David's. He has many of them, and use that story to really illustrate how the spirit world can interact with us on different levels. So I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, yeah. So first I'm going to share a story. I'm going to take you on a journey with me and explain what was going on with me on the inside. And then we're going to come back and we're going to deconstruct all this stuff from a mechanical, how the brain and the body and the spirit world kind of interact, and how I had to adapt and adjust. Because I understand the mechanics, I was able to adjust and not lose this opportunity. So It all started back, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. And this went on for a couple of years. But when it first started, for the first month or so, at night when I would drive, if a street light was on, it might turn off. And if it was off, it might turn on. So if I was driving for 15 minutes at night down a highway or a road, a little side street even, lights would start going off. Not every one, but it was frequently enough. I'm like, that's kind of weird, or it would turn on. I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I'd say to my then wife, did you notice that? And we'd both start watching for it. That's kind of weird. And even the kids were kind of like, that's kind of weird. And then I would count them. I'd start counting them. Okay, so this was going on for a while. I'm a little bit slow spiritually. I'm a reluctantly spiritual person. I've always been spiritual. My whole life I've had these incredible phenomena happening around me, and it made my life sometimes uncomfortable because it was hard to explain to people that were with me, like, what the heck's going on here, Collister? Like, this is really weird. What is going on? Why is the ground shaking? What is going on? All these crazy things, right? So anyway, this thing was happening with the lights. And I began to kind of wonder if, spirit, I will say God. I come from a Christian orientation. Not everybody does, but that's my language, so please allow me to do that. I wondered if maybe I was getting a message of some sort through this light, but not eager to kind of interact with spirit so much at that time. I just watched it. Well, one night I was on my Harley and I had my wife. We were out for a night ride. We went someplace and we came back, and there was this one particular light where it happened every time. I don't want to say every time. Maybe there were times when it didn't happen, but it was so common that we could predict it was going to happen, right? The kids, myself, it didn't matter. We'd pull up, and I said, I thought maybe it was triggered by the weight of my vehicles, but on the motorcycle, there's no weight there. And there was this one light was right by a stop sign. That was a road that when you get off the highway, this one road, half a mile up, you hit the stop sign and it would go off, or if it was off, it would go on. And so we were on the motorcycle and we pulled up underneath it, kind of looking, and sure enough, it went off. And I thought, that's kind of weird. And my then wife said, I think that's just vibrations or something. I said, I don't know. Let's find out. So we turned the bike around, came back across the street, went the other way past it. And it went off. Was it off? I forget. Was it off?
Whatever.
It went the other way. I don't have the best memory in the world. I went the other way, and it happened again. We were like, that's kind of weird. And we thought, okay, let's see what happens. We came back around, hit it again, and then it switched. We'll say it switched on again. And we were like, okay, this is crazy. And my wife was saying, this is just, I don't know. I think this is just happening. This happens to everybody probably. Well, I said, well, let's find out. So we went across the street. We stopped at the stop sign. We're in the dark on my bike. And we just parked and we waited for cars to come by. Big cars, trucks, small cars, maybe even motorcycles. I don't know. We sat there for quite a while and watched it. It never happened. Not one time did it happen. And I said, okay, let's see what happens now. So we drove past it again. It goes off. We came back around. It turns on. Okay, so this is going off. I dropped her off at the house, and we were going to have a movie night. We were going to go get a video. At that time, it was Blockbusterville. You had to go get these DVDs or whatever. And so I dropped her off, and I went to get a DVD. And not paying attention. Now, obviously, I would say at this point, Spirit was knocking on my door. I wasn't willing to have any guests at that point in the night. I had an agenda. I love movies. I'm a My hobby is screenwriting. I'm a professional writer, so I love movies. So when I was going to Blockbuster, I was pretty focused on having a movie night and watching a great movie. And I'm walking around, and all of a sudden I start getting dizzy. Like, okay, what's going on? It wasn't like sickness. It wasn't like a physical type thing that you get when you're sick, but it's just kind of disoriented. Like, what's going on? My world's starting to fade in and out. And it was more, a good word is disorienting. I was very disoriented. And I'm like, oh, and I'm thinking, leave me alone is what I was actually thinking. I knew what was going on. I'm like, Spirit, leave me alone, right? I want to watch a movie. And so, but it just got so intense. I'm like, I got to go. I don't feel well. I got to get out of here. And so I left. And as I was leaving and kind of obeying the knock, responding by leaving, it started to lighten up. But then as soon as I got home, I thought, I'm just going to go to bed. I was pouting that I didn't get to watch a movie. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do anything tonight, honey. Sorry. So, I went and laid down in bed, and I'm just kind of mad and steaming and pouting. And I started feeling more and more uneasy like that and disoriented. And then I looked, and the light was off. There was a little light in the, on there, and there's light coming through the windows. And I looked up, and there was this being standing next to me. I would have called it an angel. Would call it an angel. You might as well call it whatever you want. But what it looked like, it was a tall figure, larger than me. And I'm laying down in the bed and looking up at it, and it looked like it was standing in water. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like if you saw somebody in water and then you extracted the person from the water and all you had is the three-dimensional silhouette and you could see water. That's what it looked like to me.
Okay.
And he's looking at me, or she, I don't know what it was. I didn't see that kind of detail. I could see eyes and stuff like that, but it's big and angelic. And I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. What's your mission? Like, let's get this thing over with, But what I actually said, and I thought, what is your mission? But what came out of my mouth was, what is your name? Because sometimes their names are attached to their mission. Certain types of spirit have certain types of roles and responsibilities, just like we do in our workplace or in our lives, right? So I wanted to say, what's your mission? But I said, what's your name? And it told me its name was Zebulun. Now, when it said it to me, it wasn't an external audible experience. Not my eyes, this was not my imagination. It was like I could see the wall behind it, but with my eyes I could see this thing. But when it spoke to me, it hacked my brain and put audible experiences inside of my head, but it wasn't me imagining it. It's like if I think about somebody saying something to me, that feels one way. When you're in a dream and somebody's talking to you, you have no clue that you're dreaming. It's just you think you're experiencing it, right? So that's kind of what it felt like. It was talking to me, and it was explaining to me. This Spirit started explaining to me some of my mission and what its mission is for me. And it had to do with creating a kind of a financial economy for, the conscious community and for teachers and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, whatever, hurry up, get it over with. I'm going to, if I can be okay after this, I'll go watch a movie. And if not, I'm going to pout and go back to sleep. And, so I'm kind of hurrying it. But then I thought, it explained this message to me, and I thought, if I don't get up and do something with this, it's just going to pester me again.
Well, and I just want to add for people who haven't heard your stories before, this is not a new message for you.
No, this had happened. So there was a season, and this went on for about 15 years. Like if I went to a spiritual kind of encounter environment or a church or someplace like that, it was not uncommon for me to visit even a church out of state. In my travels, just go to kind of get away from things, go into a church, and the pastor, and this sometimes happened in churches of thousands, and I would just try to hide, like, oh Lord, please don't let it happen. I don't want to stand out in this crowd right now. This is not cool to me. The pastor might stop mid-sermon and look at me and say, you, stand up. I'm like, I don't want to stand up. I'm literally trying to hide here.
You're always so reluctant.
Yeah, well, not always, but I have a reluctant, skeptical spirit. I'm very Spock-like in some ways, right? So I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. But they would have me stand up, or maybe if it's a one-on-one, people just stop talking in the middle of their sentence and say, I feel like I'm supposed to give you a message. And it was always the same message.
Right.
It was that somehow I was going to be involved in creating this kind of economic system that allowed people who were spiritual to get paid to just be good, conscious, spiritual people. Like it was like paid consciousness kind of a situation. And I like,
wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, whatever. And I have some ideas since then.
It's coming.
It's coming, yeah. I let it go for about 10 years. I walked away from it. I didn't want to hear any more about it.
So back to the story.
But back to the story.
Same message you've heard before.
Same message I'd heard before, but in a little bit different light. It was using the term Zebulun. And I had heard that word. That's one of the 12 tribes of Israel. And, I've studied theology for 35 years, so I understand a little bit about Zebulun, but I wasn't super knowledgeable about what that might mean as a message. Usually names have meaning. Like your name, Sarah, has a meaning.
Right.
And my name, David, has a meaning. So Zebulun, and it was kind of talking about things in a different way than I'd heard it said before to me in other messages that I'd received through Spirit. And so I got up and I thought, okay, I'll go look this thing up. And the internet wasn't as profoundly as expansive as it is right now. Google probably was just getting off the ground if it had even started. So I did a little bit of internet and I went to some books. I pulled out my Bible and I was looking there. And long story short, it had to do that there was a symbiotic relationship. The name Zebulun, which I had no way of knowing after I did some research on it, had a symbiotic relationship with Issachar, another region next door. But Zebulun was kind of like this tribe that they so valued teaching, and the people of Issachar were known as the great teachers. They were fascinated by logic and signs of the times, what's going on through circumstances and social movements and all of these things. What might Spirit be saying to us? Zebulun was a group of people that said, we love and appreciate that so much that we will fund that. Like, we'll get behind this. So they were raising money for these teachers to focus specifically on their teaching. And that's kind of the theme of this concept. But at that time, I didn't quite understand it in that way. And I thought, okay, that's pretty cool.
It kind of gave you a new nugget on an old message.
Gave me a new nugget. Okay, now, end of that night's story. Get up the next day. I'm sitting there in our house in Kansas City, and my wife was vacuuming the floor, and I'm talking to a friend on our cordless phone. It wasn't my mobile phone. It was a cordless phone system in the house. And I'm talking on the phone and saying, this thing messes with lights. Like, it's got something to do with power. Zebulun happens to be the place where Jesus started doing his miracles. Like the land, the Sea of Galilee, where he performed his first miracle as changing water into wine at the wedding. That was in Zebulun, in that region, in a place called Galilee. Anyway, so I'm explaining this to a friend of mine who's very spiritually active and in tune, and explaining this thing it's been turning on lights, and it told me that it was responsible for the lights going on and off. And I'm like, I just wish this thing would leave me alone. It's kind of just, I'm ADD, so it's already distracting for me to drive and do too many things, let alone lights popping on and off in front of me. And so I'm talking about this, and all of a sudden the power goes out. Vacuum cleaner stops 4 feet away from me, and I'm like, what's going on? And I stop. I go check the breakers. Nothing's wrong. I don't know if the whole neighborhood went out. I have no clue what was going on. There's no apparent reason for the power to be out. And I'm going, what's going on? So I went and grabbed my phone because I wanted to talk about this thing. Like, okay, there's something going on here. Mm-hmm. And my friend, is talking to me on my cell phone now, and he's saying, David, you really need to pay attention to this. Like, duh. Angel visits you, lights go on and off, okay, yeah, all right, but I'm still like, yeah, whatever, I'm so tired of this stuff. And so as we're talking on the phone, I said, all right, scientific part of me, Spock, I'll put this thing to a test. I said, I'm on the phone. My wife's sitting there listening to this conversation, trying to figure out what's going on with the power. She wants to vacuum. And I said, all right, Zebulun, if that's you doing all this stuff, and that's you that just turned off the power here, turn the power back on. And as soon as I said on, the power went right on. The vacuum cleaner went off. My wife jumped up in the air and screamed. And my friend's laughing, going, see, I told you need to pay attention to this stuff. So anyways, that's me being the reluctant spiritual person. And there's some lessons to be learned from this about how Spirit interacts with us and the mechanics. I would like to get into explaining the mechanics of what was actually going on and the interplay between my mind, my spirit, my body, and spirit world and the earth, all those things.
Yeah, so let's just point out the different levels that the spirit world was interacting with you on.
Okay.
Can you just quickly run through those?
Well, it was operating with me on a spiritual plane first. So this was not me being intentional. I wasn't seeking this out. It was happening phenomenologically outside of me. The light's turning on.
You mean
me.
on an earthly plane?
On an earthly plane.
Right.
Spirit was interacting with the earth around me because I wasn't giving it room to speak to me the other way. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to take another route with this guy. Maybe, just maybe, this tard will catch on. Sorry, I know that's not politically correct. Maybe we can get through to this guy. And so it's doing this light thing off and on, and then it went. That was one level. The next level was at Blockbusters, right? Where I started to have an experience with my body. Like I'm getting disoriented. Then my mind is not able to control what's happening in my brain. I'm feeling, it wasn't dizzy, but it kind of felt like being dizzy. It's just disoriented. Like there's some bleed between worlds. Like I'm starting to go through some sort of a portal unintentionally. I stumbled into a portal, so to speak, or the portal, I believe, was brought to me. Like it was.
So you would say that that's the spirit world acting upon your body.
Acting upon my body.
Okay.
And so bypassing my mind because my mind didn't have a clue what was going on. So it was affecting my body, the neurology of my brain and my physical senses. And then when I went home, it's now acting upon my visual sensory perception.
Still your body.
Still my body, right? And it's acting on my eyes. Now, there's two ways this can happen. One way spirit can interact with us in any of the sensory perceptions, but specifically we'll talk about the next series is the next segment that we're going to do later is on the visual sensory perception of spirit. There's two ways it can activate our visual senses, and this is really helpful for you to know. One is it can actually be there and you can see it, right? It's like this glass. Okay, a glass appears in front of our face and it's floating in the air or something like that. Like, okay, that's there, right? We touch it, we sense it, we feel it. I couldn't touch this thing. I didn't dare to anyway. I wasn't interested in poking this creature in any way that it didn't want to be poked. So one way is they can physically appear in a way that acts through our normal way of seeing things. We get photons coming through our lights. It hits the rods and the cones, hits the optical nerve, blah, blah, blah. Signals go to the brain. The brain interprets it for us, all that. It can do it that way. Or spirit can kind of act remotely. It could be in its nice little cozy pad in its own part of the spirit world and say, I need to dial in to so-and-so and get to them. So it's got its own virtual reality system, and it's remotely kind of sending a message to us. And the way that remote system works is it acts upon our brain. It instantly acts upon the neural maps that we already have created for our language. Water. I understood water. Perhaps I couldn't have understood what was happening if I would have saw it in person. It might have been too phenomenal for me to even grasp. It might have been weird. It might have been scary looking to me. I don't know. But it chose to take a different route and just say, okay, he's got a pattern for water. I'm going to paint myself through the brain, through the neurology. I'm going to paint a pattern that this cat will understand. Like he won't be too spooked and he won't run because he's already reluctant and doesn't want to do this. So that's one way. So what's next?
So you're saying, just to recap that point, is when it's acting upon your body, it can actually be coming through your normal sensory pathways, or it can just go directly to your brain and give you an experience that way.
Yes.
Okay. So
it can happen both ways.
You had each. And then in the end, actually, it went back to the earthly plane when it was interacting with the power in your house.
And then the next day, yeah. So, then I also, when I was doing research, I was getting messages. But it wasn't through an angelic appearance. Okay, so the internal audible. The internal audible was it not speaking out loud through the normal system so that the little fibers in my ears were wiggling and creating the normal path for hearing things. What it was doing, it was acting on my neural pathways inside of my brain to make me hear something. It has a very cool virtual reality system, spirit does, and that's kind of how it works. So anyway, so that clearly to me says that was kind of its own virtual reality. It was acting on my brain, not so much appearing and speaking audibly like you and I are speaking. So knowing that, I understood, I could accept that. I know that it works like that, and it didn't freak me out. I was kind of put off by it almost, right? So, but then as I went and started doing research, I was feeling inspired thought. Like I was getting things, like I was reading things and I'd read that and information would pop out like inspiration. It was just like a download of knowing something. Like fully formed concepts that I didn't think through. I didn't work through it logically. It's like boom, boom, boom. All these flashes of understanding and how this economic system might work. Like I was getting fully formed things that later I went back and judged it. That's another really important point to make in this, Sarah, is, we have this front part of our brain where the executive functions mostly reside, and that is, it's an arguer. The frontal lobe, the executive functions, argues with us. It tries to take over everything and say, this doesn't make sense. We want it in a different way.
Well, it tries to control things.
It tries to
stay
control
safe.
things. We used to think that part of our brain, that reasoning part of our brain made decisions. Behavioral economics has later proven, there's Nobel Prizes to prove it, that we don't actually make decisions with that thing that we think we make decisions with. It happens with the subconscious mind. So, but one of the important things in spirit, when you're engaging spirit in any way, is not to judge it as it's happening. So I wanted to logically argue with this thing. Like, you're not really here. I know what you're doing. You're virtual reality. You're messing with my neurons. That's what I could think that. I knew I could think that. I turned it off. I'm like, because I know that if you want to experience spirit, you've got to be able to control that judge in your brain. And I don't not judge it. I just reserve to judge it afterwards. I reserve the right to judge it, but I tell myself after the experience, otherwise you can shut the experience down.
Right.
We have free will. You can turn a button off in your brain and says, I will not see this. I will not experience this. And we'll prove this to you in future things. We'll show you how this works in the brain. We'll give you some cool kind of phenomenological exercises and experiments to play with. And it will work. But so one of the important things is I knew to listen. Like, don't sit here and judge it because I was in a pissy mood. Crybaby David. I knew not to do that. Otherwise, I was going to have to go through another one of these things, and I really wasn't in the mood. So
we've talked about it interacting with spirit world, interacting with us on the earthly plane, interacting with us on our body in different ways. I'm actually curious: is there a point in that story at which you would say it was interacting with your mind?
So my mind being that part of our consciousness that's kind of the intermediary between spirit and our body.
Yeah.
And body includes the brain and the heart. So yes, when I was getting those sparks of inspiration, I was reading and researching and fully formed ideas were coming to me. They weren't coming to my brain. They were coming to my mind that exists outside of the physicality of my brain, the mind. And it was getting that information there. Like, I understood it instantly. Like, I fully understood this big, involved, complicated concepts that it was sharing with me. It took my mind some time to translate that into information that I could then communicate to people. That was like a secondary process to the revelation. So a lot of times when we get inspiration, if you talk to inventors and people that experience this stuff in altered states, what happens is they get it fully formed. Then their mind looks for ways to communicate with our somewhat weak brains. They're brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing, but they're not the most powerful things in us. Our spirit has more power and our mind has more power intellectually and all these kinds of things. So what happens is the mind begins it's an interpreter, takes spiritual concepts and interprets it so that it can work with our brain. Whatever abilities that we've developed to perceive things with our brains, it now transfers it just like a translator would. If you were speaking to me in French, and I'm listening, okay, I can see she's excited or she's mad or whatever she's feeling. I don't know what she's saying. I need somebody to translate. And you've traveled the world, all over the world, many places. This woman is an adventurer. When somebody is translating, they're not giving you a word-for-word translation. They're translating sentences and concepts, right? So in Spanish, the sentence structuring is different than it is in English. So translation isn't Interpreting isn't word for word translation. It's conceptual information. And so the mind has the ability to hear something from spirit that is in its raw form. We couldn't understand it. The mind takes that information and says, okay, I've got to work with this brain and this body to get this thing downloaded fully into this human's experience. That's person's spirit, mind, and body. And so it translates that information in an understandable way. And now I can absorb it. I can think about it. Language is a separate skill of the brain. I can communicate those concepts now. But that was a process of the mind working, taking that inspiration, that spark, and translating it, interpreting it for me in a way that my mind and my brain and my body can use it.
Right. Okay, cool. So we've talked about spirit world interacting on the earthly plane, on our bodies, and also on your mind. To wrap up this whole story, what would you say that you actually took away from this experience for yourself that you could pass on to our viewers?
Well, spirit has access to the entirety of our experience. It has access to forces in the earth, wind, rain, fire, all the elements. It has access to manipulate these things. What you will learn in future episodes is that you own what you perceive is not your reality. It's your reality, but it's not the reality. We will prove this. Neuroscience proves this. This is not mumbo jumbo. This is the way it works. We will show you that your eye makes up most of what you see. It paints a picture based upon what you expect. And so
that's the next video.
That's the next video. So when you are engaging spirit, look around you for abnormalities, because you have to provide a door. You have to put cracks in your communication systems that go beyond these patterns that we anticipate and that we only allow things to work a certain way. Don't go to spirit and say, I want you to speak to me. And by saying speak to me, I want to hear an audible with my ears. You can say it all you want to. Maybe that spirit, that particular spirit, doesn't have the capacity to speak your language. Right? So what are you going to do? You're going to tell it to talk to you in a way that you can't understand? Well, how's that going to help you? So you just have to make yourself open. One, look for abnormalities in your world. You start seeing the same number over and over and over again.
A lot.
Yeah, you're constantly getting those things. You start getting certain concepts or words coming at you, just like, ooh, I keep hearing this one word, like in the most bizarre ways in certain places. Pay attention. That's spirit knocking on your door. The way you respond to that is to open up. And we're going to talk much more about how you can, there's some hacks that we can teach you that allow you to open up your neurology, your physiology, open up all of this part of you so that spirit has more of a crack, a hole to come in and speak to you. Open the door, basically. If it knocks, open the door. We're going to teach you how to open that door on a visual level, an auditory level, taste level, smell level, kinesthetic or tactile level, and also in the thinking level, the level of creativity and inspiration. We'll teach you how to make room for spirit.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for your story.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Many more stories to come.
Yeah.
And so you can catch all of these stories and other videos. We have lots more training and illustrations to come. You can find us on Facebook at Inclusionaries. We have a page there that you can like, and you can also subscribe to us on YouTube, Inclusionaries there as well. And we look forward to communicating with you again on the next video.